Just changing topics completely and going more on the sort of transformation side or how data is managed. How does companies like Stryker, how do you organize managing such volumes of data in your organization? How do you manage it? How do enterprise companies look at managing their data? What your thoughts on this area?
Yeah, well, it's not easy just because there's so much data and, proliferation of data, right? It's very easy to just make copies of data. So it's not really easy to manage. And then through M&As that, for companies that have high activity, obviously, you're just getting new core to the business data as well. How do you manage it? Definitely having the right enabling technologies. I think it's a big enabler, right? And if you're talking, you've got to look at it from different aspects, right? I think it starts with like identifying even what kind of data you have, right? And what kind of priority or criticality to that data. So how do you find it, discover it? How do you use the right technologies in order to manage it, right, from a profiling, standardization, quality, governance perspective, putting the context around it. So the metadata around the data, right, knowing what it is, what do I need to use it for? So I think it's a combination, however, of having the right technologies that help us do all of that, right? The discovery, the ingestion, the quality, the, like MDM or unifying the data to get what it means, to making it available at the right time for either transactional processes or analytics, types of programs and visualization. So bringing in the right technologies and the right architecture. But I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, the technology alone is not going to do it. So how do you manage it? You've got to, again, have the right operating model, the right leadership, driving these kinds of programs, the right people in the right roles with a well-defined, I think, operating model that can also flex and scale depending on what happens, right? Because again, change, movement, a lot is happening. So that's kind of like my thoughts on that. It really being good at bringing all of that together. And it's definitely not a simple thing to do. A lot of different aspects to it.
And then, you've got those kind of infrastructures in place. You've got looking at data kind of from whether you put MDM in and so on, and managing the discovery. And then you get this cloud thrown at you and you get these buzzwords coming at you. Let's go build data lakes out. And then now data meshes or data fabrics. And these are buzzwords, and the vendors are pushing those out, and the analysts, out there are saying you must have a data lake, and then I see the statistics of how many data lakes are actually successful, really low. And then you now got the buzzwords of let's put a data fabric out there. So what do you think these terms mean, and how should companies behave towards them to adopt them or interact with them?
Yeah, it's actually funny. Data lake was even a bigger buzzword. I forget the year, but this was several years ago. And, where everybody thought, okay, just bring the data in the data lake and I'll deal with it. And that's great. That's going to solve my problem. Well, two problems that I see with that. Number one, again, just bringing everything on, co-locating all of your data in a data lake on the cloud. That's fine. That's not going to solve your problem because technology alone will not do it. The other problem is having all this data. If you don't know what it is, if you don't understand the business context of it, and that's where the metadata around the data, right? Just tagging the data, knowing what it is it relevant? I mean, a lot of times I say this, I was speaking to this topic at once, right? And I had this graphic of looking for a needle in the haystack. It doesn't matter. I can have all the data in the world. If I don't know what it is that I'm looking for, I'm not looking for the relevant data to fix my business problem, right? Then just really wasting time and spinning cycles, which is where I think the whole data fabric idea comes in to help, because that helps us really make sense, I think, in some aspects of it. What does this data mean? How do we need to use it? And then how do we organize it to make it available? So, for example, we have, the semantic layer with logical views of data. If I want to look for something about a customer, something about a bill of materials, or, something about a supplier or a transaction on them, right? How do I have those unified business views, if you will, right, to make it available so that people can also go do self-serve analytics, visualization, or whatever else they need on data that has already been curated. I think the data fabric concepts brings some of that in there, so that as we're working with the data on the cloud in a data lake, right, we can more effectively and efficiently use this data. We're actually actively managing it, not just processing it, because it's all available in one, infrastructure, right, in one data lake, so to speak.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting because the needle in the haystack and understanding what question, as I see it, that people are trying to answer the questions of tomorrow. Okay, and what's the question?
Yeah.
And so hence the needle analogy there. And so understanding that and then having the right data in the right place.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so, this view and the mesh or the fabric approach of having some data in the cloud and some data on-prem, where it makes sense, and then allowing that context question to be asked so you can then resolve that quickly for the business. I think is the right side, but you're spot on. The movement towards everything in the data lake, resulted in data swamps in some cases.
Right, exactly.
And what did I really achieve in moving? My cloud costs just went out the roof. So that's kind of just something to people to think about. A good way of phrasing in terms of the data fabric and looking at the question in hand rather than the needle really nails it in my view.